Hello, good morning, and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Good morning. You know, that's how they say this is Lagos. Good morning from Abuja. I'm Maokpe Ogun-Yusuf.
Well, we've heard this said over and over again, Maokwe, that when you go to other states, you say, welcome to or you're welcome to the, but when you get to Lagos, this is Lagos, not a welcome. Just inform, just to let you know, this is Lagos. But, you know, all of that, you know, and factoring it into some of the conversations that have gone on in the week gone by, as well, especially of that report we brought to you on Saturday concerning the FG infrastructure tax credit scheme. I'm wondering, first of all, how the states take that on board, how that helps to create employment, how that helps to solve what problems in particular. Of course, we know that the federal government has been talking so much about the infrastructure gap, which the Minister of Works and Housing, the Honorable Minister of Works and Housing, had said that we need at least 15 trillion naira over X number of years. I don't have that specific figure right now, to bridge the infrastructure gap significantly. But from what we are hearing now, and there are those who also think that maybe it is time for the private sector to also intervene in the matter. Maybe there is a role, a bigger role for the private sector than what is obvious to us. But all of that you'll probably see later. But then, taking a look at what we have now, Markwe, I'm wondering if you think this has any significant take on the entire spectrum of challenges that we are contending with.
Well, it certainly does. It certainly does. You know, normally when you pay tax, when we all pay tax into wherever it is we pay it to, I mean, company tax, I think, goes to the federal government. I'm not certain now, but I know that payee goes to the state. That I'm certain of, because I pay payee, and I know that it's supposed to be for the locality where you are. Even living here in the Federal Capital Territory, there is a local tax authority that collects tax on behalf of the locality where we are. That's on behalf of the FCT. There's also FIRS, but then there's a lower one for the FCT specifically. Now, I do not know if they collect company tax. I think that company tax, I'm not certain now, and tax people can correct me, but I think it goes directly to the federal government. Now, when all of these taxes are collected into a central coffer, what usually happens is then it is disbursed along health, I mean, for a number of needs, for, you know, a plethora of needs that we have. All of them mostly developmental issues, security, health, roads, and what have you. And we've since seen that the figure that accrues, the monies that accrue to the Ministry of Works is not sufficient to bridge the infrastructure gap. Every year we talk about an infrastructure deficit. So it would seem that the federal government has gotten a bit creative, because the companies who pay this tax complain about how the federal government is not exactly pulling its weight where, you know, where they're doing business. They're not really feeling the effect of the federal government. Take a look at, say, for instance, the Apapa port, for instance, where, you know, a lot of businesses are hauling their goods from the port into the city and into different parts of the country. We've seen since then the state of that road and how it's been left like that for many years, and how even when it was in that work starts, there isn't enough in the budget, because when you look at the budget of the Ministry of Works, it will now be shared amongst the different areas of the country that needs it. Oftentimes there's even a conversation of how much a certain part of the country got versus how much another part of the country is getting. Now, this is not helping the nature of work that needs to be done. And usually when you do a portion of work on one road and you don't finish that road within a certain period, the chances that you would reduce the lifespan of the area where you have already constructed are quite high. So the federal government has found ways to be creative by saying, you know what, companies, you can come, you can, tell us the roads that you would like to do. I think that those roads must meet certain criteria. Recently, I had a conversation with the Minister of Works and Housing on a sister program, Hard Copy, and he spoke about some of the criteria that needs to be met for the companies to qualify for this tax credit scheme. Bring your monies, bring your tax, which you would normally pay over, say, a period of how many years, upfront. They are the ones who you use that tax to construct a portion of road which would also meet certain criteria and would also be valued in a certain way. So that way, we can get work done quicker and faster for certain roads, which will not just benefit the companies involved, but also benefit the generality of the public. So for instance, take a look at, say, the Apapa port. It's the quickest example that comes to mind. When that road is fixed, it will not just be fixed for Dangote, which is the primary spearhead. I think Dangote, and I'm not certain Flower is also in on the project, but Dangote, I'm very certain, is on that project. It will not just benefit that company, it will also benefit a lot of companies and even smallholders who bring in their goods through the port. So the road has to meet certain criteria. So in this report, which our correspondent, Gloria Umezuki, she's our Villa presidential correspondent. I'm looking for the State House correspondent. That's the right word to use. She covers the presidency. She did an analysis on just how far the tax credit scheme has gone, the benefits of it. So far, so good. Some people have said, oh, they're not very certain what it is, how the tax credit scheme works. The minister has said very clearly, the Executive Order 7 is what spells it out, that he wants companies to read this policy. They should understand the policy, and they should apply. And it's something that could work. I do not know how many companies will qualify eventually, but a few companies have qualified, and a few of them are already benefiting from it. So let us hope that more companies will key in, and at the end of the day, it will be beneficial on the whole to Nigerians. There'll be questions as to whether other areas of government will not suffer as a result of this, because if companies that would normally bring, huge amounts of money into the tax coffer are already beginning to do work from that and is going straight to works, whether, for instance, health will not complain or, say, transportation will not complain, there'll be questions like that. But I think that if we're able to face a certain part and say, this is what we're able to do with this particular tax. And infrastructure is something that when it is done, the people are able to appreciate it easier because it is rock and mortar, it is concrete, or you can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it. So let us hope that the benefits, because I think that's what needs to be stated more clearly, how far do we hope to go with this scheme and be able to weigh it as against all other schemes which we'll employ in trying to bridge the infrastructure deficit, Ayo?
Well, definitely, Marco, you have literally done the analysis for us, and I think everyone will benefit from that quite greatly, because what's interesting is that the infrastructure tax credit scheme of the federal government dates back October 26, 2017, when the Federal Executive Council, at its meeting of that day, made the establishment to incentivize private sector participation in road infrastructure, in particular federal roads infrastructure, through what they call a tax credit scheme. But how far-reaching that will be, maybe you want to take a quick look at this report.
When the president signed a 10-page Executive Order 7, known as the Road Infrastructure Development and Refurbishment Investment Tax Credit Scheme, described as a public-private partnership intervention, it was seen by many as a triumph. The scheme grants income tax credits to companies or corporations that provide funding for the rehabilitation of roads, and such roads are projected to guarantee speedy construction by the private sector across the country.
If you look at the roads that the government has prioritized under this scheme, they tend to be very, very strategic roads. East-west roads, Bajana roads, Apapa roads, and things like that. These are very significant roads where the impact can be felt across the entire value chain.
It's a very good initiative, but then you have to hope and pray that politicians don't hijack it for their own vested interests along the line.
The federal government is confident that this initiative, which already has both prospective and actual players, is a win-win situation for the government and the private sector.
The instructive thing about this is that this initiative helps government to achieve many things, including ministerial mandates 3 and 4.
Experts who seem to agree that the tax credit scheme is generally a feasible idea note other areas which potentially could become major concerns.
For the recent one around the NNPC, fixing road, there was a lot of debate about why do we have more roads in the north than in the south. And they said, well, but it's more expensive to build road in the south than it is in the north. And I said, at the end of the day, the conversation should have been this amount of money. If it were to go to the federation account, we know the formula for sharing it. Just calculate it and say this is the amount that should have gone to the south. Then spend this amount on roads in the south. That's the only way you can be fair. So I think that's one big area of, I'll say it's a gray area.
The eligible roads are to be approved by the President on the recommendation of the Minister of Finance and published in the Official Gazette of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So far, 8 companies have been awarded road construction contracts under the scheme. The executive order also ensures that companies will be entitled to tax credits for the project cost incurred.
The government can consider at the right time expanding the scope of projects that can be undertaken under schemes of this nature beyond road.
Because private sector is likely to do it quickly, complete it, quality is better, what you then find is you get the multiplier effects on the economy. Imagine if Lagos-Ibadan Express Road had been completed 2 years after we started.
Some experts also believe that it might be imperative for the scheme to constantly go under review to ensure the attractiveness of the scheme is not diminished and to equally address the grey provisions of the order or any other stakeholder concerns arising from the implementation of the scheme. Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
Let's begin this part of the program this morning with the Vanguard newspaper, which leads with Forex row threatens fuel supply, price stability. Stories on page 5 of the paper this morning. Private depots maintain dollar charges. Independent marketers kick, say price could rise further this week. FG to continue absorbing bridging costs. That's what you have on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. And you also have this one, collapsed buildings, insurance cover uptake dismal as regulators look on. Is this in any way helping the issue at hand? Okay, look at, you may want to take a look on the inside pages to find out exactly what we're talking about here. Patronage of construction all risk insurance is 20% of GPW. Insurers seek more awareness. All of that packed on the front page, and the stories on the inside pages. Nigerians securing admission to US varsities in 2020 spend how much? Right under that graphic, 172 billion naira on tuition. Interesting, right? Stories on page 7 of the paper. The back page has a lot of sports stories. Eagles turn against Raw and so many others. Man U to pay Solskjaer £7.5 million severance package. Details inside. Is that why it's taking so long? Find that on the inside pages. Mr. and Mrs. has this one. Mr. speaking from somewhere off camera. Dear, better watch it. You're getting overweight. And Mrs. says, a scientific study discovered that women with extra weight usually live longer than men who complain like this. If I were you, I'll mind my own business. That's the Vanguard this morning.
End of story there. Well, look at leadership this morning, and they have this one. Pressure mounts on PMB to sign Electoral Act Amendment Bill. That's the lead story on the front page now. Governors, lawmakers, lobby president. You can bet you they're lobbying him for different things. But yes, we received news that the Electoral Act Amendment Bill was sent to the president on Friday. So wait to see just what will happen with that. It's a page 4 read. CSOs, others make case for assent. Say bill reflects people's will. President has 27 days to OK bill. Interest of Nigerians should be paramount. That's according to lawyers. You also have a few other stories here. Army vows to treat bandits as terrorists, even when they haven't been named that just yet. But that's the vow of the army. AGF DSS denies seizing El Zakzaki wife's passport. It's on page 9. And you also find this one. Operational issues delay use of 180 billion naira customs vessels at Lagos Jetty. For those who should be concerned, it's on page 7. Let's leave it there for leadership newspapers.
The Nigerian Tribune is interested in something completely different. Alleged hidden 19.3 billion naira. Kogi attacks EFCC. Uh-oh, right? Demands retraction, links ordeal to Bello's 2023 ambition. Story is on page 3 of the paper this morning. Right above the nameplate, a story that's been making the rounds for quite a while. OAU postgraduate students autopsy holds today. NIPOST's Postmaster General says justice will be pursued to logical conclusion. The story is on page 29. Very, very, very sorry story, that one is. And a lot of questions revolve around that one. What happened in that hotel room and for how long has that kind of thing been going on? All of that you'll find on page 29, hopefully, of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Okay.
Front page of Daily Trust is that story in is it Osun State? Very disturbing story that we saw happen there. But let's look at what Daily Trust has for you. They say it's an exclusive. Kano beats Southeast in VAT collection. Yobe collects higher than Ekiti, Edo, others. Abia got 10 times more than it generated. That's someone speaking. Claim sharing benefits. Okay. The claim that sharing benefits northern states more than south, erroneous. That's somebody else speaking. States will bear the brunt of decentralized collection. That's according to experts. So this VAT somehow is back in the news. That's what Daily Trust is focusing on. Don't forget that the Rivers State government had taken this to court. They had won at the Federal High Court. It was taken to appeal. Even from appeal, before the appeal has even been heard, they've taken it to the Supreme Court as well. So while we wait for that, it will seem that states are beginning to pick up. Maybe they believe that this could be in their favor. Let's see how that would work. There's an analysis for it. Kano beats Southeast in VAT collection. That's exclusive that Daily Trust has on the front page for you. Bandits' family trapped as Air Force bombards hideouts. Yeah, that's what you find on the front page as well. Ex-Cuba aspirant killed as gunmen abduct many on Kaduna-Abuja Road. Federal government to increase basic education funding to 3% of Consolidated Revenue Fund. That story is on page 4 of the paper. I think it's also been a cause for there to be an audit of how much has been spent on basic education so far and whether we've really seen the rewards or the dividends of the money spent so far. But page 4 might give you details. Let's leave it there for Daily Trust.
That story you talked about, the lead story of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning, Mark, where raises a lot of questions as to how that collection, VAT, whatever it is, drills down to the people in the hinterlands and all over the place to ensure that we can reduce to the barest minimum cases of urban migration and improve the people's welfare where they are. But then, as you said, the case is in various courts at various levels for different reasons. We'll find out more on that as events unfold. New Telegraph this morning leads with this one. Senate President, why criminals shouldn't enjoy ethnic political support. Stories on page 2 says, Africa looking up to Nigeria. Is there anything the National Assembly can do about that, really? Because, you know, there have been that allegation from time to time that there are some people in the National Assembly who had hitherto been quizzed by security officials. And there you have, you know, some of them as lawmakers. How will this position of the President of the Senate, how is it going to be? Is there anything the National Assembly itself can do about that? Find out the details on the inside pages, hoping you'll find something like that. On page 3, Rivers militant group blows up Ajib facility, cites neglect. I hope this is not coming back to us. Stories on page 3. Warns company to deal with communities individually. All of that you will find on page 3 of the New Telegraph this morning.
Well, let's look at the Abuja Inquirer for you, and they have this: how insecurity fueled teachers' strike in FCT. Teachers expected back in classrooms Monday, that's today. FCTA to prioritize teachers' allowances, they had better. Schools to get perimeter fencing. So let's not forget that there was an abduction that happened right here in the FCT at the University of Abuja. Lecturers, their homes were broken into and they were kidnapped. Thankfully, they were rescued by security agencies who, you know, put up a yeoman's job in getting them back and arresting those who had carried out that attack. But that did not escape the attention of teachers who tried to call attention to it by embarking on a strike. So I think a part of the result of that is the schools are to get perimeter fencing. And we really hope that it will be perimeter fencing, not just front fence, as we've seen in many situations. Let's take a look at this other story. Drama. Kogi government denies ownership of returned 19.3 billion naira. Yeah, that was also in the news yesterday. Look at this one. Oshibajo eulogizes Captain Dean as Lalong Jang. Others attend burial. That's also on the front page of the Abuja Inquirer this morning. Yeah, Captain Dean, father of one of the giants in broadcast as well, still a dean. And also, well, a patriarch in his own right in Plateau State. COVID-19, FCTA seeks to vaccinate 1.5 million residents. It's on page 5 of the paper. I hope that this drive, you know, will be something that they take seriously. That we'll get to see when we go to, you know, say the malls, for instance. There will be a stand for COVID-19 vaccine. Get your vaccine here. We're hoping that they'll be more aggressive about how they, you know, go about this vaccination drive. And it won't just end up in hospitals. You know, people don't like to go there unless they're ill. Let us leave it there for the Abuja Inquirer.
It'll be interesting, Mark, to see that part that you just talked about. It will almost be like peddling vaccines on the roadside, and I hope that will not make things worse. But then, I mean, you've just raised an issue, which is that of we need to be a little more creative in how we get this done, because this one is not just another vaccine. It's one that you have to get some form of certificate after you take it. The Daily Times newspaper has this one: fuel, electricity, that's the interest. Mixed reactions trail IMF advice on subsidies removal. Fuel, electricity subsidies not sustainable. Benefits very lean, say experts. NLC cautions against subsidies removal. Urges FG to be wary of IMF prescriptions. All of that you'll find on the front page of the Daily Times newspaper this morning. And a number of other stories you'll find interesting on the bottom. Well, the bottom strip says, religious freedom violation. Can questions U.S. government data used to delist Nigeria. I'm wondering where that is going. Is it that Nigeria should remain on that list? I don't know, but the story has its details on page 4 of the Daily Times newspaper this morning. And with that, we wrap up the papers today. And it's time for us to take on the issues for the day right after now. Please stay with us.
Getting to Manga community is by no means an easy task, as Channels Television's crew, in the company of security operatives, have to travel for more than 7 hours by road and water. When we arrive at the community, We see burnt houses, children loitering and their parents nowhere to be found, houses deserted. This is the aftermath of an attack by Amazonian separatist soldiers from the Republic of Cameroon on Manga community in Takum local government area of Taraba State. There is palpable fear and grief among residents in this community. A delegation from the Taraba State government and security agencies are here to get first-hand information on what transpired. According to reports from members of the community, residents of Ukpa, a border community in Cameroon Republic, who were separated from Nigeria because of the 1961 plebiscite, crossed over to Manga community for refuge for fear of being attacked or killed by Amazonian separatist soldiers.
There have been series of attacks in the Cameroonian side. Before that day of attack, they had, on the night of Sunday, invaded the same village they used to attack. And some of those people ran down to this place. On Tuesday, they saw men with guns following this way. They thought because we are brothers, if these people come, we should keep them. They never knew that they were going to pay for it dearly.
Investigation reveals that the border community, which has an estimated population of over 3,000 residents, has a porous border with the Republic of Cameroon and no network coverage, but they speak the same language with their Cameroonian neighbors. Residents, however, say the intervention by Nigerian immigration officials who engaged the separatists in the gun duel helped to reduce the number of casualties. They are appealing for border security outposts in their community. While the Taraba state government plans to send relief materials to victims of the attack, the military has established a base to confront any external aggression.
As soon as I give a report to His Excellency Architect Dairo Dixon Ishaku, I believe the immediate thing that will happen is to consider relief materials to the affected people because they are in distress right now.
It is expected that with the measures taken by the security agencies and Taraba state government, residents who fled the community will return and pick up the pieces of their lives.
Hold on. Well, that's how we start this morning. We're looking at that attack which happened on Manga community in Taraba State by Amazonian rebel soldiers. We have joining us to discuss this Brigadier General, retired Brigadier General Sani Osman, who's a former director of the Army Public Relations and also a former spokesperson of the Nigerian Army. You're welcome to Sunrise Elite this morning.
Thank you very much for having me on your program. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, we saw that story break sometime last week, and we heard that about 12 people lost their lives in that attack, including the traditional ruler of that particular community. And a lot of Nigerians were initially alarmed because they're still alarmed, but I think their fear was that this was carried out by Cameroonian gendarmes. But now we understand that they were Amazonian rebel separatists who, carried out that attack on that village, very vulnerable village. I do not know, what are you, because our correspondent has been there now with security agents and the Taraba state government who went to carry out an assessment, and they've since found out that the border is porous. There was a reason why the attack happened as well, even though some people say there's no excuse. But primarily, what we notice is that there is no significant government presence in that community, and so it made the community even more vulnerable to that attack. What are your thoughts, or what were your thoughts when you first of all heard about this incursion onto Nigerian territory by foreign separatists?
Well, I think it is not surprising simply because over time the separatists have been getting really active, particularly on this side of on the other side of the Nigerian border. What I mean is that Cross River and Taraba State, you know, neighboring Cameroon, and there are kind of divergent reasons also for it, in the sense that if you look at what the Ambazonian leader was saying, Dr. Samuel Sako, he was saying that actually it was the Cameroonian Defense Forces that they have reported in September that they will disguise as Ambazonian to carry out attacks to give an excuse for a cooperation between the Cameroonian defense forces and security forces with the Nigerian forces to deal with you know, Ambazonians that are residing or taking refuge in this country. And you know, but then again, there are also stories that it is some of those that are staying in one of the refugee camps that staged the attack. However, there is one other reason also, and if you notice also in the clip that you've just shown by the reporter, there is a kind of relationship between the communities, and it is common among the border communities, not just only in Nigeria, in some of the African countries, you know, that because of affinity of, or do I call it cultural and historical affinities, they tend to see the other ones as their brothers and sisters, as the case may be. So the community has been playing host to this separatists, you know, but it turns out that a criminal is always a criminal. And the remote cause of it is that actually one of the Ambazonians was killed, and so they suspected that it was the village chief that, you know, fingered him out for, you know, killing. Then you remember some time ago, one of their leaders that was hiding here in Abuja was handed over to the Cameroonian government, you know, by the Nigerian government. So there are so many, you know, built up issues that led to this, you know, attack on this hapless community. And you are rightly, I mean, you are right. Even though the military has established about 4 forward operation bases, 2 in Cross River State and 2 in Taraba State, a lot need to be done in terms of government presence, because that is the problem we have. I wonder what happens to the, you know, border communities commission, because these people, they are always at the receiving end of complex situations, and sometimes they are neglected with common social facilities and infrastructures are not available, and they tend to be tempted, or you know, to kind of be loyal to whoever that tends to take care of them. So basically, these are the combination of factors that brought about the problem that we just saw, which leads to the unfortunate killing of the chief and some other people, and the abduction of some. And unless decisive action is taken, but I know for sure the security forces, particularly the military, are taking proactive measures to make sure that this will not occur. And if it does, definitely they will trace and deal with the perpetrators of this crime. And so far, I was even made to understand that some arrests have already been made.
Well, the factors which you list, you know, already say how complicated the issue is. What it would also mean, or what it would also point to, is the fact that a thorough investigation needs to be done. Because if the Amazonian rebels are denying the attack, knowing the implication of what it could spell, because there are already those who are saying that if rebels are coming into the country, you know, and the Cameroonian government is not for them, and of course Nigerian government will not be happy about that, the chances are very high that we could see bilateral cooperation with Cameroon, you know, to ensure that this sort of attacks do not happen, at least on Nigerian soil. So it will mean, especially now that the Amazonian rebels are denying that attack, that a thorough investigation, maybe a more thorough investigation needs to be carried out to find out who precisely carried out the attack.
Well, certainly there should be beyond what the military have done so far. But I can rest assure you that there is no denying the fact that these attacks were carried out by the separatists, the Amazonian separatists, regardless of whatever Dr. Samuel Sako will say.
How are
Because
you certain about that?
of course, arrests have been made, and of course, they have started giving out information as to the identity of those responsible. And like I told you earlier on, the communities play host to some of these people. They know who they are, but due to cultural affinity, they tend to neglect that aspect. And one thing I want you to understand, this is not the first time such things are happening, not just with Cameroonian separatists, but even in those days when, there were rebels in Chad. In those days, Chad has never had a normal democratic governance. So you are either in government or you are in opposition. And even if you are in opposition, you are a rebel. And they had their camps along the fringes of Lake Chad basins. Those were the people that form the earliest bandits that we had. You know, if you remember the Kwanta syndromes, way back in the northeast. So basically, these are the issues, and we tend to neglect that particular aspect as regards to border communities. And it is not just our border with Cameroon and Chad. We have that with Niger Republic. We have that with Benin Republic. That's sometimes we had instances where the activities of the village chieftains in Nigerians on the Nigerian side are being sponsored by, smugglers. Take for instance, in between the Nigerian border and Benin Republic. Therefore, their loyalty and affinity tends to be on the other side. And when criminals come, they know how to lure people. Such things do happen. So beyond the thorough investigation, there is need to also critically evaluate the activities of the Nigerian, Border Commission, and to see to what extent can we enhance the well-being of our various border communities, not just issue of physical security, as the military and security forces are doing, but in terms of, infrastructures that will enhance their well-being so that they will have greater sense of belonging, and these people will not come and, entice them with certain things.
It was saying that, the issues around border communities are a bit complicated.
Very.
Part of the complication is the fact that, there's always affinity between, look at this village now. They have a sister community that, was ceded to Cameroon as a result of a plebiscite. But their people still very much identify with their brothers in Nigeria. And it was saying that they're just a stone throw away. So that when those people felt that they were going to come under threat, the people in Manga decided to give them refuge, and that now even made them even more vulnerable because Manga came under attack. I do not know if we have been able to do any, research or study on how to handle this sort of peculiar situations where we have border communities. Does the Army have a policy, for instance, for how it treats issues along the border? Especially when it involves border communities?
Yeah, actually, this is even beyond the army, beyond the military. I think it's a national issue when you talk about policies, irrespective of border communities. I have just mentioned the issue of Nigerian Border Communities Commission, or I can't say precisely the name, but I think that is it. So there are policies nationally. To what extent do we follow them? And to what extent those that are statutorily responsible for the well-being and administrating as well as the security of these border communities are doing is entirely a different matter. But I know for sure, the military are being proactive, and I know, take for instance, 23 Brigade has cited beyond the forward operation basis, some of the battalions under it, they are now being model battalions. So it is not just a name, but in terms of sophistication of equipment and what have you. So, but what remains is to further enhance that with good governance and further support to the border communities.
I put a lot of emphasis on Manga community because, theirs, it would seem, just came out of the blues. We've seen quite a few other attacks, and you've mentioned a few of them. Before now, we used to see, our border with Chad also come under some, attacks every now and again. But with Niger, in recent times, we've had a lot more fire from that end attacking the northwest of the country. We've seen how Sokoto, for instance, was also in the news last week. There was a very murderous attack on some communities in Sokoto State. Before now, there had been some quiet because even though Sokoto had come under attack a few times before that time, we had noticed a lull in activities, so to speak. But it would seem that there is a resurgence. What did we do right, and how are we dropping the ball, in such a way that we're now losing lives once again?
Well, I know for sure that the issue about the fight against banditry and kidnapping, particularly in the Northwest, is equally complicated. However, I think the weapons or the investment in the weaponry by the federal government is gradually paying dividend because the capacity and capability of the Nigerian Air Force is enhanced, and the Army has just taken also over some equipment that were, procured for them. So that account for the lull of the activities. And of course, the measures taken by some of the state governments, in terms of shutting down markets, shutting down telecommunication facilities. And so combination of that. Well, they are at it, the military made concerted effort to degrade the bandits and clearing some of their accounts. And in fact, the most significant was the, precise air attack on bandits camp by the Air Force last Friday. So by and large, some of these border communities are far-flung, and the military needs other equipment. And that is why somebody was even talking about, look, the newly procured APCs, bulk of it should go to the northwest as against going to the northeast. To what extent they are doing that is something else. But then, just like you mentioned, it is kind of complicated. There is also the menace of the issue of war economy, because there are people that are benefiting from these wanton destructions and killing and kidnapping of people simply because they are benefiting from it. Take, for instance, the informants, and take, for instance, people that supply them logistics and what have you. So they know for sure, because they have far better knowledge of the terrain and the environment, so they tend to, make sure that they inform them and they perpetrate such acts.
Okay. Well, let's quickly go to Lagos now. I understand my colleague Ayo has questions for you. Ayo.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. Well, General, the issue you mentioned about border communities is quite interesting to me. I mean, you've talked about the intervention of the military, what the army has been doing, the equipment that they have gotten. But we also understand from previous comments of, retired generals, especially a former chief of army staff retired, who was saying, as far as he's concerned, only military hardware is not the only solution. We need to intervene in the social sector, social lives of the people, which underscores the issues that you raised concerning the development of the border communities. And there is, as you said, a Border Communities Development Agency. The chairman of that governing council, of the governing council of that agency, is the vice president and has the attorney general as a member as well. And part of the functions of that agency, which I'm pretty sure many people are hearing about for the first time today, is to ensure that the communities develop and not make them vulnerable as they are now, infrastructure development and all those things. So in the light of what you said about how far-flung these two communities are, Ilela in Sokoto, for instance, is very, very far from is a border community with Niger, and of course we've heard about Takum, which is a bordering community to Cameroon. I'm wondering, with what we have on our hands now, is there anything really that cannot be done to develop these agencies, these border communities, to at least get some partnership with them, so that we are not as vulnerable as we are now?
Is it that cannot be done or that should be done?
Well, I asked that deliberately because, I mean, one would have expected that what to ask is what can be done. Is there anything that cannot be done? Is there anything impossible for us to do that's made us so
I quite
vulnerable over
understand
time?
what you are saying. Yeah, exactly. Believe me, sincerely speaking, no effort is too small. We really need to secure the border. And the unfortunate thing beyond all these things that are happening, it is also the issue of the porous border and neglect of the border community is also affecting the counter-insurgency and counter-terrorism efforts of the Nigerian military and security forces. Therefore, nothing should be spared to ensure the well-being of the border communities and ensure that they are properly, administered and secured. Beyond that, if you look at it, in fact, it's so sad and unfortunate that we neglected them. There is no single border community that you look at and be happy or proud that actually there is semblance of government presence as it is expected to be. Therefore, there is need for us to ensure that they are properly secured and properly administered, replete of infrastructures. But it is not just the border communities. It is also about all other communities in the Nigerian society. It may surprise you to know that there is a local government headquarter in Borno State. I don't know as of today, but I know within the last a year or two, there has never been a motorable road to that community. And meanwhile, it is just a stone throw to Niger Republic. So for goodness sake, how do we expect them to have a sense of belonging vis-a-vis the enticement being offered by these terrorists? So I think there is a need for a concerted effort to ensure that the well-being of these border communities are being taken care of and they are well secured.
Well, we hope that, that what we've just seen right now, because what we've seen also is that security agencies have now gone to Manga community. Apart from the assessment, it was seen that they have now had a station, situated in Manga community. We hope that it will not just be for the now. How do you think we can do this on a sustainable basis? Because the chances are high that today is Manga. We don't know which other community it will be, and we also know that our security agencies are a little overstretched. How do you think we can handle this, putting security agents in or maintaining some presence in border communities in a sustainable fashion?
Well, I think it is not just, I know for the past years the forward operation base were there, and it's just that they are being reinforced and enhanced. And I believe it's ongoing process, given the fact that these threats have clearly manifested themselves, and the Amazonians, beyond what we have, there are also allegations that they have gone into a kind of understanding with indigenous people of Biafra. So this is something that has to be taken very, very seriously beyond the security forces. The government, particularly the federal government, has to look at it with the desired attention it deserves, so that beyond the military solution, there should be other constructive engagement, particularly with the Cameroonian government. Even though we have bilateral agreements under the auspices of multinational joint task force, possibly we should respond it further. But beyond that also, there should be diplomatic engagement. And I made mention of it earlier on, that the issue of these borders are also disturbing or rather affecting the fight against terrorism and insurgency, because just quite recently we noticed the influx of foreign fighters, and they come through in some of the neighboring countries. So therefore, the federal government really need to really talk to some of these countries. I know that in particular Cameroon is cooperating very well, but there is need for improved cooperations, and which will be spearheaded by...
Okay, well, we've spoken about that. Is it also possible for us to, you have said that they're just being reinforced, but we also know that a few more communities might not have this presence. Is it possible for us to be thinking of an audit or an assessment of our border communities and seeing those ones that could be vulnerable, and seeing how we can reinforce our security presence, preempting any attack on those places?
Yeah. You are quite right. There should be such things, more so If you look at it, the Cameroonian side, the issue, the communities, so far away, and the terrain is so mountainous, and communication services are very poor. So, but each of the border communities has its own peculiarities. Therefore, there is need to look at those peculiarities and see how best we can further, guarantee their safety and security.
Well, I think it's a fine place to leave it. We hope that that beyond what we've seen, that issues around border communities are taken a little more seriously, considering just what they could spell for security, national security in Nigeria, and of course Nigeria's territorial integrity. We have to thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. Retired Brigadier General Sani Osmani is a former director at Army Public Relations and also a former spokesperson of the Nigerian Army. He's also a consultant director at the Corporate Affairs and Information Nigerian Army Resource Center here in Abuja. Thank you for coming on Sunrise Elite this morning.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure.
Well, we'll take a break at this point. When we come back, we'll also have another perspective on this issue. Please stay with us.
Still on that same matter, we have with us here Colonel Francis Okosons, who is a retired military officer and security consultant here in our studio. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you. Well, a number of things have been spoken about this, and but I'd like to take you up on something slightly different on the same issue, especially because the attack both in Taraba and Sokoto are around border communities. So the first question that comes to my mind is, what happened to all of our border control agencies, like customs, immigration?
Well, this all boils down to a question of governance. We became independent in 1960, and the entire country was the responsibility of government. If in 2021 we're still talking about porosity of borders, we're still talking about inability to secure ground, territory, or terrain, then we are accepting that things have not been done properly. Now, the Yoruba say, Olokpa Bode, that is the border protectors. These are the customs and immigration. To some extent, the police. If you have this sort of situation, it simply states or says or explains or betrays the fact that what ought to be done has not been done.
Well, that is the situation. I mean, listening to the governor of Taraba State, when we engaged him on another of our programs, he was saying that, well, the immigration officers were there, but then they were outgunned and out-armed, so to speak, and they did the little they could do. But after, when the other side came with heavier firepower, they had to run for their own lives. And when you speak about governance, I'm wondering specifically what you're talking about here. Is it that we have completely ignored what we are supposed to do to engage our borders, or we are not even speaking to the border communities in the language by which they would themselves take ownership of the Nigerian nation as theirs?
To a large extent, what ought to be done has not been done.
So what are these things?
Border protection. Now, I listened to Governor Ishaku talk about the thinness of the immigration elements on the ground in Taraba. And I think that replicates itself all over the place. Now, you would have in strength customs and immigration at border locations where such border locations are, for want of a better word, where they are attractive. Ilela, Seme, Idiroko, the one and the Calabar axis, those areas will be attractive for them to deploy in strength. But take a place like Manga, for example. From what the governor was saying, it was just a very, very thin deployment. And if you put less than 10 men in that post, it's not an attractive post where you deploy so many, where people would want to be posted to. So when you have this kind of skirmish, as we had there, of course, they were overpowered, and when that happens, the people run for dear life. So what I'm saying, in effect, is that if you had had a well-thought-out contingency plan to man these locations in strength, even if not manning them by human resource, there could be other technical resources that could be deployed in such areas.
Such as?
Well, I'm not in the immigration, but there could be technical resources that you deploy there for early warning. And if you have such early warning, you can have a report back system where you can have a fallback system, and then you can have replenishment of support.
Well, it sounds to me that, I mean, from what you are saying, it would seem like, you know, we have failed our people because, according to the governor, you know, a good number of people have died, 43 at the last count, if memory serves right. And it's about the same number. You have a good number of people in Taraba, but it's about 43 or so in Sokoto State. And one is wondering, if we continue to, and this is not the first time, especially in Sokoto State, you heard in the previous communication as well, in the Northwest, in the North Central, even in the Northeast, one is wondering if we are, for a long time, as my colleague said in the previous interview, for quite a while we haven't had this kind of this kind of thing happen. You know, these attacks seem to have kind of tapered down. But then it would seem like there is a resurgence now, failing which, if we do not do anything, it would seem like we're just beginning to scratch the surface. At what point, in your opinion, do you think we dropped the ball, or you think we never even picked up the ball?
First, let me say, I will not characterize it as failing the people. Rather, it is that we've not been doing things right. We've not been doing things the way we ought to do them. And so we're embarrassed ever so often. I mean, this is an embarrassment because what ought to be done was not done. What am I talking about? Every entry point should be known. Every entry point should be and must be protected in some form, in some reckonable and reasonable form. The people expect from their government a measure of protection, and they're not getting it. They're not getting it. Not only in Manga, in so many other locations, they're not getting it. So until you determine to do the right things, you are going to be having this kind of embarrassments cropping up.
Is there, can we also assume failure of intelligence in either case? One of the one in Taraba, for instance, I mean, the general that we spoke with us earlier also talked about some diplomatic intervention necessary. If we say, the governor of Taraba State, whom you also listened to, said that no one knew that this was going to happen. Is it possible that such an attack would happen on a country, on our territorial integrity, and we would not be aware at all?
Okay, I would want to sound like a crack record again. Nigeria is made up of 774 local governments. And to each local government is assigned elements of the Department of State Service. To each local government is assigned elements of the Nigeria Police. These people are supposed to be on ground. These people are supposed to give you information processed by the relevant agencies or departments. If you had a police presence in that part of, and I'm sure that place must come under the command of some police commissioner, some area commander, or some DPO. So if you had such elements on ground there, how come, therefore, that they didn't read indicators? How come, therefore, these indicators were not interpreted? So, and you have, this is a situation that involves my country and another country. And in Yaoundé, I'm sure you have elements of the National Intelligence Agency. This is a strategic matter, for crying out loud. So, is there not a desk officer there who is responsible for that swath of territory. What has he done? What has he been doing? What was he doing? So there are questions that must be asked before we can apportion blames. If you ask me, if you put me in a position of authority today, I'll summon the DGNI and say, come on, let me have your desk officer. Let me have his report, back reports for the past 6 months. Let's see if there are any pointers to this likelihood, this thing that happened. If you do such things, if you carry out such probes, and I use this loosely, then we'll be seeing things done differently and much more purposefully. So if you had that sort of a thing happen in Manga, and you have not sought to find out from those who should know, then we'll sit down here and just be wasting our time.
Well, Colonel, the Constitution says explicitly, security and welfare of the people shall be the primary responsibility of government.
Absolutely.
From what we have seen now, it would seem like all the people, for all the people who have died in these two communities that we're talking about today, government hasn't done its bit well. And from what you're saying, questions should be asked from specific agencies of government. One can only hope then that that will be done. Are you optimistic?
I'm old enough to know that inquiries in this country have not quite been useful. Again, you set up an inquiry and all the hula baloo and all the noise and all this dust is raised, and soon after that, nothing is heard. But here, I would underscore the fact that the frontline establishments or organizations that are meant to take responsibility are asked to do their job. They are asked to do their job. Now look at the poor chaps, the immigration, the customs, and the soldiers who were sent to go, including your staff, who said, somebody said they were on the road and on water for over 7 hours. Well, if you had layered system, you would not have had to go that distance to go get information that could have been fed routinely. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not speaking in parables, am I?
Well, maybe to those who really do have an understanding of this, and the issues have been quite significant. And now there are those who are raising this as some form of resurgence, especially because issues concerning Ambazonia, which is the southern Cameroon territory, has been a long time coming, so to speak. One is just hoping that, as we have discussed, the government will do the needful. But just one more issue before we let you go. Just yesterday, we heard this report that there was an attack again on Abuja-Kaduna Highway, and talking about another resurgence of sorts. I recall that it was in January that it was celebrated that 300 female soldiers were dispatched to Abuja-Kaduna Highway, and it seemed like when that happened, everything else went quiet. We hadn't been hearing that, for a long time. A particular community, I do not particularly remember that community now, is said to be notorious for this kind of activities, the banditry on the Abuja-Kaduna Highway. It's at this very location that the military was said to have set up a helipad just to at least try to reduce, if not eradicate, cases of attacks in that community, on that road, especially in that area. Please, is there anything that we stopped doing or that we decided not to do anymore that made this to research?
Francis Okosun cannot tell you why that particular incident came about. But I can tell you for free that when you fight insurgents or bandits or this kind of asymmetrical thing, it's not a cut and dry solution. You can find a cut and dry solution too. It's in the nature of conflicts that you have lows and highs, that you have victories and setbacks. If it happened, we'll learn from them. I will learn from such and try to prevent it in the future. You would always have casualties in battle. You will always have defeats. You will always have victories. You see, we should not arrogate to our fighting forces infallibility or invincibility. These are people who are susceptible to mistakes, missteps, and so on.
Well, if it is possible to not have casualties that are unarmed, I think that's really the goal. If, as we said earlier, the responsibility of government is to protect lives and property. So if lives are not protected, we definitely have to.
Can I get casualties that are unarmed, did you say?
I mean, you talked about the fact that, there will always be casualties, but then nobody wants people who woke up in the morning with no intention to die, finding themselves in the situations that we have had in these three communities.
It's regrettable. No
Most
doubt.
certainly.
Yeah.
Well, as we always say here, government has its job cut out. We have to thank you very much for your time this morning.
My pleasure.
Colonel Francis Okosun is a retired military officer and security consultant. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much.
Well, Sunrise is back. Sunrise Daily is back in just a moment to take on another issue. Do stay with us.
Arriving the forecourt of the presidential villa in a motorcade, the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is received by Nigeria's President, Muhammadu Buhari. The U.S. top diplomat is on a three-nation tour in Africa, and Nigeria is his second stop after Kenya. The burning issue of security and possible assistance, among other issues, are central at discussions held behind closed doors. During the hour-long conversation, the globally recognized End SARS protest also came to the fore, prompting a reaction by the president. In a statement issued afterwards by the special advisor to the president on media and publicity, the president declared that he would wait for steps taken by states and allow the system to work. He says he will wait for their reaction and not impose ideas on them. Building on this, the American Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who walks in with Nigeria's Foreign Affairs Minister for a media conference, expands on the conversations, maintaining that the U.S. is looking forward to the government's response on the End SARS report.
By tackling these issues, we can help to address some of the problems that have been key drivers of insecurity. To that end, let me say that we welcome the conclusion of the investigation by the Independent of Inquiry established by the Lagos State government to look into the events that took place near Lekki toll gate in Lagos in October of 2020. This, of course, was amidst the End SARS protests, including the killings and other alleged abuses by the security forces.
Against the backdrop of the recently procured A-29 Super Tucanos, the top U.S. diplomat is more concerned about building capacity and human rights.
We're working with Nigeria to address security challenges, including those posed by Boko Haram, ISIS West Africa, and other terrorist and extremist groups. In meetings with the President, with the Vice President, with the Foreign Minister, we discussed the importance of a comprehensive approach that builds effective security forces, addresses the underlying drivers of extremism, and respects Nigerians' basic human rights.
Nigeria's Foreign Affairs Minister further buttresses views by Blinken, who tells journalists that partnership with Nigeria is not about wielding more influence than China.
We have wonderful relations with the U.S. and we have wonderful relations with China, economic relations, and it'll just it'll be on an ad hoc basis and based on the interests of Nigeria, not on the interests of China or the interests of the U.S.
The American Secretary of State will be meeting with faith leaders in the country to promote peace as the U.S. looks forward to enhancing more ties with Nigeria to confront other issues like climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic. From the presidential villa, Gloria Umezuki, Channels Television News.
Ambassador Joe Keshi joins us to look at the issues around the Nigeria-U.S. relations, especially in the light of the visit of Anthony Blinken, who is U.S. Secretary of State. Thanks for joining us this morning. Question that comes first to my mind is, for you, what stands out in this visit for Nigeria?
A lot for me stands out very clearly. When you listen to the U.S. Secretary of State and the message that he brought to this country, we are dealing with the issues of relations between the United States, but I think that we should look at that speech again and see that he came in here to deliver a message to us as a country and as a people, that despite the internal contradictions of this country, despite all the challenges we have in this country, that the world looks on to Nigeria and indeed to Africa to be part of the global conversation, to be part of countries that are solving some global issues, that they see Nigeria as an important country. It reminds me of, the early days of Nigeria's independence, when the world expected so much. There was so much promises about this country. And I think for me, that was a central message that must not be lost to us. The world expects so much from us. And this is very, very important. And he went on to, just like your reporter would say, how we need to begin to focus on the drivers of insecurity, the drivers of poverty and underdevelopment, because these are some of the issues that has, you want to put it, that has probably lowered the importance of Nigeria on the global stage.
That's quite significant, the issues that you have highlighted there. The question that comes to mind again is, does Nigeria, from what you know and where we are now, see herself as significant a nation, given the internal divisions, a lot of conflict even among, some agencies, ministries, departments, and all of that? Do you see us working towards that unity and strength?
Not really, a lot has happened over the last couple of years. We have in some areas a broken system. I'm not too sure that people, these days connect being in government and also acting in order to promote, the image of Nigeria and, the national interests of this country. And so this is why you find that anytime anybody comes in here, they give us they give us a lot of lectures about, what to do and what not to do and the rest of it. But if we had done the things that were expected of us, if we had, over the last couple of years, I don't think we'd be in this very sorry, state. But that said, we can only continue to, to hope that with time, that people, particularly those in government today, will appreciate the essence of their responsibilities and know that beyond personal interest, they're expected to promote the interests of the country. And this is where a number of things go in, decisions that should be made to ensure inclusiveness, to ensure fairness, to ensure justice, to ensure that we have a good democratic, practice or system. It's not enough to say, oh,
We've had democracy surviving in Nigeria for over 20 years. But how has it been? The fact that you've been having elections and, we are changing governments here and there does not really mean that we are truly a democratic nation. There are so many other things that goes into being a democratic nation beyond the elections. So, but I think that with time, with a steady, good leadership, inspiring leadership that can galvanize and inspire all of us to a common cause, the cause of Nigeria, making this country a good, strong, indivisible nation. I think with time that we get there.
Well, that agreement that was also signed, running into billions of dollars, is part of, what a number of people have called the U.S.'s efforts at least helping the country as much as it can. How do you see us taking advantage of that and other, bilateral relation deals that have been signed over time? What are the things that you think are crucial for us to do as a nation within ourselves to ensure that we take full advantage of the potential that these partnerships bring to us?
To make this, take for example the issue of arms supply to the Nigerian military. The fact that we have purchased these arms do not suddenly indicate that the war against Boko Haram, for example, is over. I think it's just to strengthen the Nigerian military. And the success of the Nigerian military will certainly indicate the essence of the purchase of these arms and ammunition from the aircraft from the United States. In other words, a number of things we need to do, principal of which is the fact that we need to build the capacity of our institutions. Our institutions today, whether people like to admit it or not, our institutions today, from what I can say, are very weak, and it cuts across board. In some cases, I think in a number of states, it's even weaker. But the federal government needs to build the capacity of its institutions in order to strengthen these institutions. When you have very strong institutions that play by the rules of the game, that are sensitive, to the people's concern, that are prepared to actualize the national interest, I think you begin to see a lot of changes. And look, and this takes a lot of work. And that also means that for us to build this capacity, we also have to do a lot in terms of human capital development, which is also very good. We also have to find a way to begin to address the critical issues vis-a-vis our economy. Our economy is again rebounding, which is very good. But the fact is that a number of people, millions of Nigerians are still living below poverty line, and we need to find a way to address that because it's one of the drivers of insecurity, poverty, and underdevelopment.
Well, you spoke about human capacity development as one of the things we need to do to strengthen our institutions in order to take full advantage of all of the bilateral relations that we have, especially such as came from the United States of America. What else do we need to do? Because I'm wondering, at what point did we begin to ebb away the strength of these institutions? Over the years, we had them in the First Republic, Second Republic. I mean, at what point do you think we began to weaken the structures of our institutions? What are the things that led to those? And beyond the human capital development that you talked about, what else needs to be done to strengthen these institutions sustainably?
Now, if you want to begin to find out at what point in time, I really think that we have to go back to the days of the military to start with. The military truncated the normal civil service succession planning. When you take even a small industry, for example, and then you get in there as the managing director, and the first thing you do is to sack all the heads of department and all those with the experience, and then you bring in new fellows, or as it was done under the military, you created states, and overnight, a level 12 officer becomes a permanent secretary in some states. What do you think would happen? Of course, a lot of things would happen. And that is exactly the price we are paying, we are paying today. But look, a number of things we need to do. First, we got to sort out our political system. We got to begin to think seriously about the recruitment process in the political system. We got to begin to look at the quality of leaders that we bring on board, because look, it's very important. We need leaders with knowledge. We need leaders with the capacity to reorder a society. We need leaders to inspire, people, because we started this conversation, we need people. Look, growing up, my generation, I believe, was highly inspired by a number of, people, both within and outside this country. I believe I said it before. I can't remember on what panel that even as young as we were, for many years, many of us were still quoting the inaugural speech of J.F. Kennedy. And I think everybody agreed that it was very inspiring, not only for the people of America, but for young people all over the world. You could look back at some of the inspirational speech of Awu or Zik and the rest of them, or even Kero, by the way, many of our early political leaders who really fought for independence. Subsequently, after that, you begin to see that the standard began to fall, particularly from the military regime. The nature of the appointments they made, the people they brought on board, and in a way, they just began to ruin the institutions. So the people who came consequently did not even realize that there was a time in which these institutions were like this. They are operating on what they know, which is not too good for the institutions themselves.
Well, Ambassador Keshi, we've spent 21 years in this Fourth Republic, and I'm wondering how long it'll take before we begin to retrace our steps. Well, unfortunately, I can't ask you so many other questions that I would love to ask you, because we're completely out of time. But I'm sure that some other time we'll be able to pick this up. Ambassador Joe Keshi is a retired Nigerian diplomat. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts this morning.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks.
All right, we'll take a short break now, and we'll be back for more on this. Do stay with us.
Well, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken may have come and gone, but at least Nigeria must have had expectations from that visit. We'll be asking this morning if some of those expectations were met, at least on the part of the Nigerian government. We have to welcome this morning our guest, Mr. Femi Adesina, who is Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you.
It's been a while. Well, let us, this visit, did it come out of the blues for you, or was it something else expected shortly after President Biden took office?
Well, it had been planned for a while. It was like an African visit, not just Nigerian. He went to 2 other countries. So it had been on for a while, and of course we were in the picture that he was coming.
What were your expectations? I mean, because for some people will say that before now, and I did had an exclusive with the Secretary of State, talking about Nigeria-U.S. relations, where I also mentioned the fact that I believe that Nigeria-U.S. relations had been strained somewhat before now, especially over the fight on Boko Haram and U.S. assistance, especially with the Leahy laws being in place. But it would seem that they thawed somewhat just around when the Tucano aircraft, leading to the release of the Super Tucanos, which came to Nigeria. He did admit as much, but said that, that it ought not to be the case, and they're looking forward to high-level relations with Nigeria moving forward. So I do not know how the Nigerians said, and this is just a journalist reading. It could be wrong, it could be right, but you can confirm to us, you know, what Nigeria-US relations had been before now and what our expectations were from this visit.
I wouldn't exactly use the word strained, at least since 2015 to now. Because what President Buhari began to do since he came to office was to reset the buttons of Nigeria-US relationship. And he had been doing that before 2015. Pre-2015, there was some strain, but not after. There may have been some maybe uncomfortable moments, but I won't call it strain, particularly when we needed military equipment, and because of the Leahy law, they wouldn't oblige us, but it was sorted out. I wouldn't say it was quite strained.
Okay, so what are our expectations now moving forward?
Is that the relationship will be stronger and it will be mutually beneficial. You will see that from this visit, Nigeria is being given $2.1 billion development assistance to help us out of COVID era and all that. That's a good one. And then, of course, there are promises in terms of military training, military equipment, and all that. And it's good. It's good to build relationships. And I think the relationship between Nigeria and the U.S. is quite good and can only get better.
So that's what we are getting, the 2.1 billion development assistance fund, which is coming. We've also seen promises of military training, etc., etc. However, what are we given?
What are we gaining?
What are we given?
Given. Oh, we are given relationship, and relationship is everything. It's everything.
How do they quantify that?
and that therefore means that you don't quantify everything in terms of dollars or naira. The fact that we are in good stead with America matters. The relationship is not headmaster-pupil relationship, no. But if it's a smooth one, both sides are happy with that.
Indeed, both sides would be happy, but I mean, you have to also appreciate when I ask, you know, what we're giving in return. If it would seem that, because some people will argue that this kind of relationship, we can say that yes, the fact that we have smooth relationships help, but it will somehow make it skewed. If somehow all you're getting is you're always collecting, the chances are very high that, you know, you could have that headmaster-pupil relationship at the end of the day.
No, it shouldn't happen. No sovereign nation should allow that. America is a much bigger power, economically, militarily, in every form, is a much bigger power than Nigeria. But Nigeria would not subject itself to America as a vassal state. We will relate, and our citizens, who are many in America, Secretary Blinken spoke about Nigerians and that they actually look forward to relating with Nigerians daily and all that. And the president said, anytime we went to America and he met with the Nigerian community, he would tell them, obey the laws of your hosts. If you are caught on the wrong side of the law, of course, Nigeria will not stand by you. Obey the laws of your hosts. So part of what we are giving back is also a good, smooth relationship, being good citizens, even in a foreign country.
Well, economic benefits had been one of the, what I say, high points of our relationship with the U.S. The fact that they were one of our biggest trading partners, especially when it comes to the export of crude oil. But that now, it would seem, is under threat as a result of focus on climate change. I know they're also supposed to help with some assistance in that regard. What exactly is now going to be the new economic focus, especially now that climate change is not a bigger part?
Nope,
crude oil is no longer such an attractive thing.
Okay. I wanted to say climate change was not the issue in terms of trade relations. It's just that America does not need Nigeria's oil again.
Indeed.
America used to be the largest consumer of Nigeria's oil. But you know the story of shale oil and discovery of oil in many parts of America. America, so they don't need Nigerians all again. It came up in the meeting between President Buhari and Secretary Blinken, and well, there are other commodities we can trade in. In fact, the president mentioned it that America used to be Nigeria's largest trading partner. But of course, what was responsible for that was also crude, which is no longer a product of demand from America now. But there will be other areas that we can explore.
Have we been able to find any other area? That's the question.
Yes, with the Nigerian economy being diversified now, you know that crude used to be 80–90% of our GDP. Now it's just about 40-something%. In fact, other areas have taken over from crude oil. So there will always be things we can explore with the United States. We now do a lot more in solid minerals, mines and steel development. We do a lot more in ICT. We do a lot more in manufacturing. Manufacturing is also inching up in the country. So there will be new vistas we can open with the United States.
Well, we'll look to see what that will be. But in the meantime, there'll be questions as to, well, the relationship which you spoke about, Nigeria-U.S. relationship is going to, you know, hopefully it's going to get better. And I know that our ambassador, beg your pardon, our Minister of Foreign Affairs also spoke to the fact that they want consular services to Nigerians to be, you know, to improve. To improve, exactly. We used to have a drop box system with the United States, but it was seen that that has now been scrapped. Is this something that we are looking forward to going back to as a result of his visit to Nigeria? Yes, it came up during the joint press conference. Minister of Foreign Affairs spoke about a drop box system, but the onus is on the Americans to do what they think is best. We can request, but they're not bound to just grant it like that. They will do what they think is in the best interest of America and what is also good for Nigerian citizens. Were we able to extract any commitment on that? No. You know, Secretary Blinken would not make he would not make commitments on the spur of the moment like that. But I'm sure notice was taken of our request. Okay. Well, one of the other thorny issues that came up during his visit to Nigeria was just that about the time he came was when the Lagos State Judicial Panel of Inquiry submitted its report to the government of the day, that's the Lagos State government. The federal government has issued, was the first time we heard the president speak on the matter, saying that the federal government wants the states to exhaust their own mechanisms before eventually intervening. And because the number of states, I mean, the states are many, and they're all expected to submit their reports to the federal government. However, because there is special interest... Not to the federal government. Why are they going to submit it to? It's not, because under the law, yes, federal government has no power to empanel a probe in anything happening in states. That is true. What will happen is that when the states come up with pronouncements on that panel report, that would then be of interest to the federal government. It's not as if they will bring it to the federal government. But we understand a few states have already brought theirs to the federal government. That we understand a few states have concluded theirs before now and has submitted reports to the federal government. I am not quite sure of that. But I know that areas that will affect the federal government would then look into. Because the directive to... I mean, there was a federal government that said, yes, indeed, this is not within our purview, yes, but states, go ahead. It was a directive from the federal government. Shouldn't they then report back to the federal government? It couldn't even have been a directive because federal government didn't and still doesn't have the power. It couldn't have been a directive. What I'm saying is a directive. Well, I don't know what to call it now, but we know that this came from the federal government. It was a part of the statement an idea, released by the federal government at the time of the protests of the NSAS, that this is what they expect of states to do. And some people will say it was a directive to the states to empower judicial panels of inquiry into investigating the alleged abuses by SARS. So when you say that, well, it wasn't quite I understand how you would say it's not a directive because the federal government cannot exactly give directives to states. However, this idea, or this push came from the federal government. Isn't the federal government in turn then expecting any, feedback to it, especially since the reforms that are required of the police will happen at the federal level?
Yes, there are some things that will be federal in nature. The federal will tackle that. But things that are states in nature, the state governments will still do.
Indeed, but majority will seem are federal in nature because we still have a federal police last time we checked.
Oh, yes, yes. Definitely when the reports come out, the ones that are federal in nature will be considered. There is an Attorney General of the Federation who will advise, and the needful will be done.
In particular, of particular interest was the protest at the Lekki toll gate and the activities that happened there on the night of the 20th of October 2020. And I do not know what interest the federal government took in that particular incident, especially since security agencies, federal security agencies, were allegedly involved in that incident. Has there been any, maybe perhaps internal inquiry by the federal government to see, while that of Lagos State was also going on, to see what exactly happened in Lagos State at that time?
That would then be contrary to the spirit and letters of the law. If federal government was beginning to look into things like that, it's within the remit of Lagos State government to do, and it is doing it. And eventually the part of the report that affects the federal will be handled. It's like dissipating energy if the federal government.
Why I ask that question is if, I mean, yes, the Lagos State government, the incident happened in Lagos, and of course it has, jurisdiction in that matter. However, the agents involved are federal agents. The agents allegedly involved, we're talking soldiers who are under the directive of the president. We're talking policemen who get their orders as well from their hierarchy. Like say the central agency is here in Abuja. Don't you think that while that was going on, there should have been some internal inquiries as to what exactly transpired, at least some report from the hierarchy to the president?
If a probe panel was in place, I don't think that internal inquiry was necessary, because eventually the relevant part of that report will come to the federal government. So I don't think it was necessary.
How soon is the federal government expecting this to, especially now that it is of international interest?
No. Was it the panel itself or Lagos State government who gave a timeline that it will be done within a certain time? And I've seen channels counting down to say it remains this number of days, this number of days. So I expect that the Lagos State government will comply with that timeline it has given.
Are you expecting that the Lagos, well, we're seeing that now it's 8 days to the release of the white paper? Yes, indeed, we're keeping tabs on that,
yes,
and we're reminding the Lagos State government of its own promise. However, is that what the federal government is also waiting for, or has there been a preliminary report to the federal government from the Lagos State government?
No, I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of any preliminary report.
In the meantime, what is happening, though, with our security agencies? Because there have been reports, even since this judicial panels of inquiries were empowered in many states, there have still been reports of human rights abuses by security agents. And one would think that, drawing from the protest that we saw last year, that should have been high up the priority list of the federal government.
You must have heard Secretary Blinken also talk about Nigeria and the U.S. having common challenges in the areas of security. He said in terms of police brutality, America has its fair share. And you know what happened, was it last year or year before, after the I Can't Breathe saga, which rocked major parts of America. It's a global phenomenon. It still continues in Nigeria, maybe to a lesser degree, than before NSAS, what is there? Because it's a human feeling. As long as human beings run certain institutions, you will have those human feelings.
Yes, the question is, what mechanisms are we putting in the countries where you've cited? Indeed, Secretary Blinken did admit that. In fact, it would be hypocritical if he didn't. That police brutality is an international thing.
Yeah.
However, in the countries which you mentioned, there have been mechanisms in place, and we see more and more people being emboldened to come forward to report these abuses. Yes. The question is, what are we doing internally to empower our own people to report and not accept this sort of abuses by security?
Two things I will say. Even in those countries where those things have been punished, have those things stopped? No, they keep happening. And that's why I tell you it's a human problem. Nigeria has these pro-panels now, the reports will come. What government, both at federal and state, does with that report will go a long way to answer the question that you have just asked. Because when some issues are tackled, malefactors are dealt with on both sides, not just security agents. You ask yourself, 38 policemen were also killed around the country. Who killed them? Shouldn't they also be held to question? So all those things are to be dealt with. And that is a way to control such things in future.
We'll see how that happens. I mean, you've given assurances, but, wait to see how concretes are attached to that, to the assurance which you provide. I want to quickly just confirm with you that, indeed, we understand that the Electoral Act Amendment Bill has been transmitted to the President.
Yes, it has been.
Do we think, will the President sign?
Like they say, pregnancy never hides. At a point it becomes evident. So when the President signs, it will be known. It will be known. I know that the Speaker of the House came to see him last week. I know that the Senate President is coming to see him today. Engagements are on. So when he signs, it will become public.
Will the governors be coming to see him too?
It's not unlikely, but I'm not privy to that yet.
Okay. Let me quickly send this to my colleague, Ayo in Lagos. He has a question for you.
Well, it sounds like two journalists are just having a banter right there, Mr. Femi Adesina and Mokwe. Just having an interesting banter. That it's cheering to see, and thanks for being here, Mr. Adesina. Just a question around some of the issues that Mokwe has raised. The visit of the U.S. Secretary of State was big on human rights. And I think it's against that premise that my colleague was asking you about the intervention of the federal government when the reports, all the reports, eventually come out. You know it's a product of the National Economic Council meeting following all of the furore over the NSAS and all of that. So one is wondering, indeed, if there is an agenda at the federal level after all the reports have been brought in, and maybe white papers at the various state levels also brought in. You said we shouldn't expect any submission. But at what point then will the federal government intervene, given that that visit of the U.S. Secretary of State was big on human rights, and these issues we're talking about around NSAS is big on human rights as well?
Yeah, thank you. When I said submission, what I meant was handing over to federal government to say, please act on everything. That would not be correct. States will act on areas that pertain to them, while the federal government will act on areas that pertain to it. And of course, human rights will always be an issue, always, globally. If you don't keep an eye on human rights in your country, and other countries don't do peer review in terms of human rights, before you know it, things will go awry, and human rights will just be trampled on left, right, and center. Human rights will always matter in any country, and it will always matter globally.
Do you think the president will be granting any interviews soon again?
We will work on it.
I'm just asking.
Oh, yes, we will work on it, and I know that he will likely do it.
Okay.
We'll work on it.
We'll wait to see when that will happen, if it will be live. Will it be live?
Live. The last interviews no, live will mean he's being taken direct.
Indeed.
No, but the interviews were pre-recorded, and they were taken the way they were recorded. No editing. At least no intervention from our side. They were recorded and played back. So I wonder what's the difference between playing it back.
No, there's a world of difference, Mr. Additional.
No, the only
know,
difference could have been if there was going to be an interaction.
You and I know that there's a world of difference between a live and a recorded interview.
Unless there was going to be an interaction from the public. That's the difference. Well, if there was not going to be an interaction and it's just the media houses asking the questions and the president answering, it's the same thing. If it was pre-recorded and if it was done direct.
But you're not able to say when this is going to happen.
I have an idea, but I won't say it.
Okay. We'll wait to see just when that happens. Yes. Just to confirm that this was a good visit in all for Nigeria.
Oh, very, very, very good. Very, very good. You have not talked about Nigeria being taken off the watch list of countries that repress religions. Very good. The secretary spoke about it. He said America did it because it found out that putting Nigeria on the watch list was not based on facts. And you know things that happen, Nigerians themselves going to America, going to feed them with incorrect positions about what is happening in the country. And that was why Nigeria was put on that watch list. But when America discovered that it was not based on facts, Nigeria was removed from the watch list. It's a very good development for us.
Well, let's thank you for coming on this morning. Mr. Femi Adesina, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity. Thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning.
My pleasure, thank you.
We have a few mails from you we'll be watching from home. Henry Okeke has this one to say on Nigeria-US relations. Says, fundamentally, the entrenchment of rule of law in Nigeria is the best assessment for our bilateral symmetry with the US. We need leaders who understand the significance of rule of law to restore our diplomatic glory and strengthen institutions of governance and make life easier for Nigerians at home and in the diaspora.
On the same issue, Oloran Loba says, we may not know our worth as a nation, but the superpowers know this. Hence, their desire to partner with us in many areas of human endeavors, despite the myriad of problems bedeviling us. We're a force to be reckoned with. We've got the numbers, we've got the resources, we've got the brains, but unfortunately, we don't have the leaders. The superpowers know that once we get it right, we'll sweep many of them aside.
And Ejike Eze, talking also about Nigeria-US relationships, says it's good that we're building relationships across the globe, but none of these countries will ever solve our problems, in my view. Every diplomatic relationship is based on national interest, first and foremost. Therefore, I'm not enthusiastic about these bilateral talks. Nigeria needs to stop coming to the negotiating table as a needy party. We need support for climate management. I think I lost that a bit now. We need support for climate management, for punishing electoral offenders, for poverty alleviation, for health improvement and other issues which we ordinarily should have tackled on our own. No country will take us seriously if we keep asking for help all the time. That's Ejike Eze's view.
Well, Professor Enakena is talking about tackling insecurity. It's time to be vigilant at Ilela in Sokoto and Manga community in Taraba State by the security agencies, and they must be properly funded with ammunition and personnel. This will alleviate the consequences of these itinerant attacks.
And this one is from Olagunjo Oladele, talking about tackling insecurity in Nigeria. Says, unless the underlying causes of insecurity are addressed, for example, the corrupt system that enables it, they might as well be there indefinitely. Corruption creates a negative national image, causes loss of revenue to the government, and deters foreign direct investment. The cost of living will be high, which is also a cause for insecurity, underdevelopment, and political instability. Well, those are the mails we have for this morning. Those are the ones we can take for now. We have to thank you so much for being a part of our program and for contributing as well. Thank you for watching. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf. Here's wishing you a great week ahead.
And I'm Ayo Makinde saying same, and please do stay safe. Have a wonderful day.